If you are listening to this right now, don't scroll, don't skip, and don't assume this message is for someone else, because there is a reason these words reached you at this exact moment, a reason your heart felt a sudden pause when you heard the first line, a reason your spirit leaned in even if your mind tried to pull away, and that reason is simple yet profound. God saw your tears last night, the ones no one else noticed, the ones you cried when you thought nobody cared, and before you dismiss this as coincidence. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear may explain why your heart has been heavy, why your nights have been restless, and why heaven has been closer to you than you ever realized. God saw your tears last night, not the kind that fall loudly where others can notice, not the kind you wipe away quickly when someone walks into the room, but the quiet tears that slipped down your face when the world finally went silent and your heart could no longer pretend it was strong, the tears you cried when you were tired of explaining yourself, tired of being misunderstood, tired of holding everything together while feeling like you were falling apart inside. God saw every single one of them, and not one tear fell unnoticed, not one moment of pain went unseen, because even when you felt completely alone, heaven was paying attention. You didn't cry because you are weak, you cried because you have been strong for too long, because you carried burdens that were never meant for your shoulders alone, because you kept going even when your soul was begging for rest, and God knows that strength like that comes at a cost. He knows the nights when your mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying conversations you wish had gone differently, replaying mistakes you wish you could undo, replaying fears about a future that feels uncertain and heavy. And in those moments when you felt overwhelmed by thoughts you couldn't silence, God was closer than you realized. There were words you wanted to say to people but didn't know how, emotions you didn't feel safe expressing, prayers that came out as sighs instead of sentences, and God understood all of it, because He listens not only to spoken prayers but also to the cries of the heart, the ones that don't sound holy or polished, the ones that come out raw and broken and confused, the ones that ask why instead of thank you. And He is not offended by your honesty, He is not disappointed by your tears, He is moved by them. Last night when you felt like giving up, when you wondered if anything would ever change, when you questioned your worth and your purpose and whether your life truly mattered, God was already working in ways you could not see, aligning moments, softening hearts, opening doors that are still hidden from your view, because delay does not mean denial and silence does not mean absence. Sometimes God is quiet because He is doing something too deep, too detailed, too important to rush. You have been asking for answers, for clarity, for relief, and instead you received another night of tears, but what you didn't realize is that those tears were not wasted, they were seeds, watered into the soil of your faith, and in time they will grow into strength you didn't know you had, wisdom you didn't know you needed, and peace that cannot be shaken by circumstances. Because God often uses the darkest nights to prepare the brightest mornings. You are not forgotten, even if people walked away, even if promises were broken, even if the support you expected never came. God did not leave, He stayed, He sat with you in the silence, He counted every tear, and He wrapped your broken heart with a love that does not abandon, a love that does not grow tired, a love that does not give up when things get messy. Because His love is not conditional on your performance or your perfection. There is a reason you are still here, still breathing, still holding on even when you feel exhausted, and that reason is not accidental. Your life is not an afterthought, your pain is not meaningless, and your story is not over. God is still writing it, even in the chapters that feel confusing and heavy, and one day you will look back and realize that what almost broke you actually built you into someone stronger, more compassionate, more grounded in faith. You may feel like no one understands what you are going through, like your pain is invisible, like your struggles are too much to explain, but God understands completely. He knows the weight you carry, the fears you hide, the battles you fight in secret, and He is not asking you to have it all figured out. He is asking you to trust Him one step at a time, one breath at a time, one day at a time. Last night your tears were a prayer, even if you didn't realize it, and heaven responded, not always in ways you expect, not always on your timeline, but always with purpose and love, because God is faithful even when you feel faithless, He remains constant even when your emotions are all over the place, and His plans for you are still alive, still unfolding, still good. You are allowed to rest, you are allowed to feel, you are allowed to admit that things are hard, and God is not disappointed in you for needing a moment to breathe. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply keep going, even when your heart is tired, and God sees that bravery in you, even if no one else does. What you are going through right now is not the end of your story, it is a transition, a refining, a preparation for something greater than you can imagine, and even though it hurts now, even though it feels unfair, even though you don't understand why it has to be this way, trust that God's perspective is bigger than yours, His timing is wiser than yours, and His love is deeper than your pain. The tears you cried last night were heard, the prayers you whispered were received, and the hope you thought you lost is being restored little by little, moment by moment, because God is not done with you yet, and what is coming will be worth the wait, worth the pain, worth every tear you shed in the dark when you thought no one was watching, because heaven was watching, and heaven cares. The reason this message is reaching you now is because God knows how close you have been to giving up, He knows the silent thoughts you have been battling, the moments when you smiled on the outside but felt empty on the inside, the times you questioned whether your prayers were falling on deaf ears, and yet even in your doubt, even in your exhaustion, you kept hoping, even if that hope felt fragile, and God honors that kind of hope. The kind that survives tears, the kind that breathes even when life feels heavy. There were moments when you asked God to take the pain away and instead it seemed to linger, moments when you begged for clarity and instead received silence, moments when you wondered why others moved forward while you felt stuck in the same place. But what you could not see then is that God was strengthening you in ways comfort never could, shaping your character, deepening your faith, and preparing you for blessings that would require a stronger version of you to carry them. Sometimes God allows you to feel broken not to harm you but to heal you more deeply, because surface-level healing fades, but soul-deep healing lasts, and the tears you cried were washing wounds you didn't even know existed, wounds caused by rejection, disappointment, betrayal, unmet expectations, and dreams that didn't unfold the way you imagined, and God was gently touching each of those places, even when it hurt, even when you didn't understand. You may have felt like your prayers were repetitive, like you were asking for the same thing over and over again, wondering if God was tired of hearing your voice, but He never grows weary of you, never grows impatient with your process, never rolls His eyes at your struggles, because your persistence in prayer is not annoying to Him, it is precious, it shows your heart still believes there is someone listening, even on nights when faith feels thin. There were lessons God was teaching you in the waiting, lessons about trust when answers are delayed, lessons about surrender when control is slipping away, lessons about faith that does not depend on outcomes, and while waiting feels uncomfortable and unfair, it is often where the deepest growth happens, because waiting strips away distractions and reveals what truly matters, and through it all God has been closer than you think, guiding you step by step even when the path felt unclear. You are not behind in life, even if it feels that way when you compare yourself to others, even if you see people achieving things you once dreamed about, even if you feel like time is slipping through your fingers, God's timeline is not your enemy, it is your protection, because arriving too early can be just as damaging as arriving too late, and God knows exactly when you are ready for what you have been praying for. There were doors that closed and it felt like rejection, relationships that ended and it felt like loss, opportunities that slipped away and it felt like failure, but what you couldn't see is that some doors closed because God was shielding you from pain you weren't meant to experience, some relationships ended because they were draining your spirit, And some opportunities passed because they would have taken you away from the purpose God has for your life. Last night when you cried, you weren't just releasing pain, you were releasing control. Even if you didn't consciously realize it, you were admitting that you can't do this alone, that you need help, that you need grace, and that surrender opened a door for God to move more freely in your life, because God steps in powerfully when you stop pretending you're okay and start trusting Him with your brokenness. You don't have to have perfect faith to be held by God, you don't have to understand everything to be guided by Him, you don't have to feel strong to be carried, because His strength shows up best where yours runs out, and the very places where you feel weakest are often where God's presence becomes the strongest. There is restoration coming into your life, not just externally but internally, healing that will touch your thoughts, your emotions, your self-worth, and your ability to trust again, and this restoration will not be rushed or shallow, it will be gentle and complete, because God is not interested in quick fixes, He is interested in lasting transformation. You will smile again without forcing it, you will rest again without guilt, you will hope again without fear, and one day the tears that once fell in the dark will turn into testimonies spoken in the light, stories that remind others that God is faithful even when life feels unbearable, and your pain will not be wasted, it will be redeemed. Even now God is rearranging things behind the scenes, conversations are being shifted, hearts are being softened, paths are being cleared, and while you cannot see the full picture yet, trust that every detail is being handled with care, nothing is random, nothing is forgotten, and nothing is beyond God's ability to restore. You are more loved than you realize, more protected than you feel, and more supported than you can see, even when it seems like everything is falling apart, God is holding the pieces, and when the time is right, He will put them back together in a way that makes sense, a way that brings peace instead of confusion, and hope instead of fear. So if your heart still feels heavy, let it rest here for a moment, breathe, release the pressure you've been carrying, and trust that God is walking with you through this season, not rushing you, not abandoning you, but guiding you gently toward a future filled with purpose, healing, and peace, because the same God who saw your tears last night is the God who will turn them into joy. There will come a moment when you realize that the season you are in right now is teaching you how to trust God without needing constant reassurance, how to walk forward even when the path is dimly lit, how to believe not because everything makes sense but because you know who is walking with you, and that kind of faith changes you from the inside out. It makes you quieter but stronger, softer but wiser, and less dependent on external validation because you finally understand that God's approval has always been enough. You may not feel it yet, but God is slowly rebuilding parts of you that were damaged by disappointment, parts that stopped dreaming because it hurt too much to hope again, parts that learned to expect less so you wouldn't be hurt again, and He is doing it gently, patiently, without force, because rushed healing can reopen wounds, but God's healing is careful and complete, even when it takes time. There were moments when you blamed yourself for things that were never your fault, when you replayed situations wondering what you could have done differently, when you carried guilt that didn't belong to you, but God is releasing you from that weight, reminding you that not every loss was a failure and not every ending was a mistake. Some things had to fall apart so you could step into who you were always meant to become. You are learning now that peace does not come from having all the answers, it comes from trusting God with the questions, and that realization is freeing, because it allows you to stop fighting the unknown and start resting in God's promises, even when the future still feels uncertain, even when clarity hasn't arrived yet. God is teaching you how to let go without bitterness, how to remember without pain, how to move forward without carrying the past like a burden, and this is not an easy process, it requires honesty, surrender, and patience, but the result is a heart that is lighter, a spirit that is steadier, and a faith that is unshakable. There will be days ahead when you look back at this season and realize that what felt like delay was actually divine timing, what felt like silence was actually protection, and what felt like loss was actually redirection, and on those days you will thank God not just for what He gave you, but also for what He didn't allow to stay in your life. You are becoming someone who no longer panics when things go wrong, someone who no longer feels the need to explain themselves to everyone, someone who trusts God enough to wait, to listen, to move only when led, and that transformation is priceless, because it changes the way you experience life, not just the circumstances around you. God sees the effort you make to stay kind when life has been harsh, to stay faithful when answers are slow, to stay hopeful when it would be easier to give up, and He honors that effort, even when no one else notices, even when there is no immediate reward, because nothing done in faith is ever wasted. There is a calm coming into your life, not because everything will suddenly be perfect, but because your heart will no longer be easily shaken. You will learn how to breathe through uncertainty, how to rest in God's presence, and how to trust that whatever comes next will be handled with grace and strength you didn't know you had. The nights that once filled you with anxiety will slowly be replaced with rest, the thoughts that once overwhelmed you will begin to quiet down, and the fear that once controlled your decisions will lose its power, not because life becomes easy, but because God becomes bigger in your heart than your worries. You will begin to recognize God's hand in small moments, in unexpected kindness, in perfect timing, in quiet reassurance, and those moments will remind you that you are never walking alone, even when the road feels long, even when progress feels slow, even when answers are still forming. There is purpose unfolding in your patience, meaning growing in your waiting, and strength being formed in your endurance. And one day you will stand in a place you once prayed for and realize that the version of you who cried last night needed this journey to fully receive what God had prepared. Your story is not one of abandonment, it is one of transformation, not one of delay, but of preparation, not one of brokenness, but of restoration, and as each chapter unfolds, you will see more clearly that God has been faithful all along, even when you couldn't see it, even when you couldn't feel it. So keep going, not in your own strength, but in quiet trust. Keep believing even when progress feels invisible, keep resting even when the world tells you to rush, because the same God who saw your tears last night is still watching over you today, still guiding your steps, still holding your heart, and He will lead you into a future that reflects His goodness, His mercy, and His unchanging love. As this journey continues, God is inviting you into a quieter kind of strength, the kind that does not need to prove anything, the kind that does not rush to be seen, the kind that rests confidently in knowing that everything does not have to happen all at once, and this strength will carry you through moments when answers are still unfolding and clarity is still forming, because peace does not come from control, it comes from trust. You are learning now that surrender is not giving up, it is giving over, it is placing the weight of your worries, your fears, and your unanswered questions into God's hands, and allowing Him to carry what was never meant to overwhelm you, and in that surrender your heart begins to breathe again, your mind begins to quiet, and your soul begins to heal. There will be moments when gratitude rises in you, not because everything is perfect, but because you can finally see how far you have come, how much you have survived, how deeply you have grown, and you will realize that even the hardest seasons taught you something valuable, something lasting, something that shaped you into a person with compassion, patience, and resilience. God is teaching you to be thankful not only for the blessings you prayed for, but also for the strength you discovered in the waiting, the wisdom you gained through pain, and the clarity that came from letting go of what no longer aligned with His purpose for your life, and this gratitude will ground you, reminding you that nothing in your journey was wasted. You will begin to notice how your perspective has shifted, how situations that once triggered anxiety now invite prayer, how uncertainty that once caused fear now encourages faith, and how silence that once felt empty now feels peaceful, because God has been reshaping your inner world even while your outer world was still catching up. There is a deeper connection forming between you and God, one that is not based on desperation but on relationship, not driven by fear but rooted in love, and this connection will sustain you through future challenges, reminding you that you are never walking alone, never facing life unsupported, never carrying burdens without help. You may not always understand why certain things happened the way they did, but you will trust God enough to believe that His intentions were always loving, always purposeful, always aligned with what was best for your growth, even when it didn't feel that way in the moment. God is preparing you to receive blessings with humility, success with gratitude, and joy with balance, so that when good things come, they do not overwhelm you or pull you away from Him, but instead draw you closer, deepening your faith and strengthening your character. The peace that is settling into your heart now is not fragile, it is rooted, it is steady, and it will remain even when life becomes unpredictable again, because this peace was built through experience, through trust tested by fire, through faith refined in the quiet moments when you chose to keep believing. You are stepping into a season where you will no longer define yourself by past pain or present uncertainty, but by the faith that carried you through it, and this new season will feel lighter, freer, and more aligned with who you truly are, because God has been clearing space for what truly belongs in your life. When you look ahead now, you may still not see every detail clearly, but you feel something different, a sense of calm expectation, a quiet confidence that whatever comes next will be met with grace, strength, and God's guidance, and that feeling is not accidental, it is a reflection of how much you have grown. So take this moment to rest in God's presence, to release what you can no longer carry, to trust what you cannot yet see, and to believe that the same God who saw your tears last night is the God who will walk with you into tomorrow, holding your heart, guiding your steps, and surrounding you with a love that never fails, a love that never leaves, and a love that will carry you through every season still to come. And now, as these words reach the quiet places of your heart, understand that nothing about your life has been accidental, not the delays, not the detours, not even the nights that broke you in ways you never spoke about, because God has been present in every moment, watching, guiding, protecting, and loving you with a patience deeper than you can comprehend, and even when you felt lost, you were never outside His care. There will be days ahead when challenges return, when uncertainty tries to creep back in, when life once again feels heavier than you expected, but you will face those moments differently now, not with panic, not with despair, but with a steadiness rooted in the knowledge that you have survived before, that God carried you then, and He will carry you again. You are no longer the same person who cried those tears last night. Something shifted within you, even if you can't fully explain it yet, a quiet resilience, a deeper faith, a softer heart paired with a stronger spirit, and this change will shape how you respond to life, how you love, how you trust, and how you move forward. God is not asking you to be fearless, He is asking you to be faithful, because courage is not the absence of fear, it is choosing to trust God even when fear is present, and every time you take a step forward despite uncertainty, heaven notices, heaven supports you, and heaven strengthens you. You will begin to recognize that some of the prayers you once begged God to answer have already been answered, just not in the way you expected, answered through growth, through protection, through redirection, and through lessons that prepared you for a future you weren't ready to receive back then. There is a new sense of purpose unfolding in your life, not loud, not rushed, but steady and meaningful, a purpose that aligns with who you are becoming rather than who you used to be, and this purpose will guide your decisions, your priorities, and your relationships moving forward. You will learn to walk away from what drains your spirit, to hold on to what brings peace, and to trust God's guidance even when it leads you away from familiarity, because sometimes the greatest acts of faith are not dramatic leaps, but quiet obedience and gentle surrender. The love of God surrounding you now is not fragile or conditional, it is constant, unchanging, and deeply personal, and nothing you do or fail to do can separate you from it, not your doubts, not your mistakes, not your moments of weakness, because His love is stronger than all of it. One day you will share your story, maybe not with everyone, but with someone who needs to hear it, someone who feels alone, someone who cried the same kind of tears you once cried, and your words will bring them comfort, not because you have all the answers, but because you can say with honesty that God is faithful and that healing is real. So as this message comes to a close, let your heart rest in this truth: you are seen, you are loved, you are guided, and you are never alone, and the same God who saw your tears last night will see your joy tomorrow, will walk with you through every season, and will finish the work He began in you, because your story is still being written, and the best chapters are still ahead.